Folks, have you heard the latest? Our very own Donald Trump is gearing up to put America first again. He's talking about slapping hefty tariffs on imports, anywhere from 45% to 60% on goods from China. Imagine that! It's a bold move to protect our industries and make sure we're not just hanging on to foreign supply chains that leave us vulnerable. This is about securing American jobs and American technology. Now let's talk about what China's doing in response. It's big news. They're not just sitting back. No, sir. Beijing's rolling out new export restrictions that are tougher than anything we've seen before. They're cutting off the supply of critical materials like gallium and germanium, stuff that's essential for our semiconductors, solar panels, and even military gear. And it's not just about stopping the exports directly to the U.S. They're going a step further by trying to block foreign companies outside China from sending us these materials if they have any Chinese origins. Can you believe that? It's a game-changer for how global supply chains and compliance might work from now on. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce says it's all to protect their national security and interests. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? After all, that's the same reason our government has been tightening the screws on semiconductor tech going to China. We've expanded our own blacklist, adding more Chinese companies that can't access our high-tech tools and software. It's a security move, sure, but let's call it what it is. A power play in this high-stakes game between Washington and Beijing. Let me break this down for you. The global game of supply chain tug-of-war just got a whole lot tougher. China controls a massive chunk of the market for some incredibly crucial minerals. 60% of the world's germanium and a whopping 98% of its gallium. Now they've slammed the door shut on exports to the US, and it's sent shockwaves through industries all over the globe. Prices are skyrocketing. We're talking about antimony costs more than doubling to over $25,000 per ton this year alone. That's hitting everyone's wallet hard. Now here's the kicker. China's not just playing within its own borders anymore. They've stretched their legal muscle to reach companies outside their jurisdiction. So if you're a business that uses Chinese materials in your products and you sell to the US, you might find yourself in hot water with Beijing's new rules. This is a big deal because it's the first time they're pulling a move like this, mirroring the kind of extraterritorial sanctions we usually see from the US and Europe. And it's not just any materials we're talking about. We're dealing with stuff like gallium and germanium, which are essential for everything from your smartphone's chips to military equipment. Plus, China's hinting that other dual-use items, those with civilian and military applications, might soon be harder to get because of increased restrictions. To top it off, China's Ministry of Commerce is coming down hard on enforcement. They're saying that anyone, anywhere who tries to sneak these critical goods into the US, bypassing their bans, is going to face serious legal consequences. It's clear that Beijing is not just making rules, but is dead serious about enforcing them to keep their technological and strategic edge. The chessboard of global trade is getting more complex by the minute, especially with China tightening the screws on exports of critical minerals like gallium and germanium. These aren't just any materials. They're the backbone of America's tech and defense industries. Used in everything from your smartphones and satellite communications to military radar systems and fiber optics, these minerals are what keep us at the cutting edge. Now, China's new regulations, they're a bit vague on the specifics of enforcement, but make no mistake, this is a clear signal that Beijing is stepping up its game. They're not just controlling these exports, they're watching their global value chains like a hawk. This means any company, anywhere in the world that uses these Chinese-sourced materials could be under the microscope. And that's a big deal for our industries right here in the US. Why is this such a big deal? Well, these materials are critical for a whole slew of technologies that define our modern life and our defense capabilities. Take gallium, for instance. It's crucial in the production of semiconductors for high-frequency applications, think radar, mobile phones, satellite communications. Not to mention, it's a key player in the LED and solar panel markets. And germanium? It's indispensable in fiber optics and infrared optics, essential for both telecommunications and our military's imaging systems. The impact here is straightforward. If we can't get these materials, it disrupts our supply chains, delays production, and drives up costs. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's a potential chokehold on the development and deployment of advanced technologies across civilian and defense sectors. It could slow our pace of innovation and dilute our competitive edge on the global stage. But here's the broader strategy at play. China is not only clamping down on these exports to protect its own national security and tech dominance, but also to leverage its position in global trade negotiations. By controlling these essential resources, China can push for trade terms that are more favorable and enhance its geopolitical influence. For American companies, this means beefing up compliance and due diligence to navigate this maze of regulations. It's about more than just avoiding fines or sanctions. It's about ensuring that critical tech components do not end up in the wrong hands. And that means investing in technologies and systems that can track and manage these sensitive materials. As tensions heat up in the global trade arena, China's tightening its grip on exports with a law introduced back in 2020. While the full scope of how far Beijing will go to enforce these new rules remains a bit of a question mark, one thing is clear. They're serious about clamping down on any loopholes that let their tech and materials slip through the cracks to the U.S., either directly or via third countries. This isn't just about regulations, it's about maintaining control and preventing the U.S. from bypassing these new barriers. Now, drawing a comparison to the U.S., it's evident that China's taking a page out of Washington's playbook. The U.S. has been setting the standard with its own extraterritorial controls on sensitive technologies for years, and now Beijing is stepping into the ring with its own version. Sure, they might not have the same robust enforcement network yet, but don't be fooled. This is China's bold step to match and counteract the U.S. influence globally. And here's where it gets even more interesting: the Russia-China alliance. As Washington cranks up the pressure, Beijing's turning to Moscow to fortify its strategic position. This partnership is about more than just political solidarity. It's a practical alliance to secure resources and bolster China's supply chains. With the U.S. trying to curb China's rise in high-tech fields, tapping into Russia's resources and its capabilities in areas like defense and cybersecurity could be a game-changer. For instance, take the Power of Siberia pipeline, a monumental project that now pumps Russian gas directly into China. This isn't just about energy, it's about securing a lifeline that keeps China's industrial engine running no matter the global pressures. And as these two giants, Russia and China, draw closer, they're not just sharing resources, but also technological know-how. This collaboration could significantly diminish the leverage the U.S. holds in controlling access to cutting-edge technologies. Folks, what we're witnessing here is a strategic dance of alliances and countermeasures. China's moves to shore up its defenses against economic warfare are clear. They're building a fortress of resources and alliances to withstand the pressures from the U.S. and its allies. As they reduce their reliance on American tech and broaden their capabilities with Russian help, the question for us is clear. How should the U.S. respond to this shifting global landscape? Is it time to rethink our strategies in trade and international policy to maintain our edge? Or do we need a new approach to handle this emerging Sino-Russian bloc? Let me tell you folks, the financial world is not just about dollars and cents. It's about power and strategy. The U.S. dollar has long been the king of the global financial system, and that status gives Washington a big stick in the form of economic sanctions and trade rules. But here's the twist. China and Russia aren't just sitting back. They're actively working to reduce their reliance on the dollar and the traditional financial systems where the U.S. holds sway, like SWIFT. What China and Russia are cooking up is a plan to sidestep the dollar, increasing their trade in their own currencies, exploring alternative payment methods, and even pushing forward with digital currency initiatives. This isn't about making small changes, it's about reshaping the financial landscape to diminish the dollar's dominance. This shift could buffer them against U.S. tariffs and sanctions, giving China, in particular, more freedom to maneuver on the global stage without always having to worry about American financial leverage. But this isn't just an economic play. It's a full-scale strategic alliance. Politically, Russia's backing gives China a hefty shield in international forums like the United Nations Security Council and other regional groups. This partnership complicates the U.S. efforts to isolate China and counter its rise. With Russia's support, China is far from diplomatically cornered. Instead, it's emboldened and has more room to maneuver. And let's not overlook their infrastructural ambitions. These two are building new pathways, literally. Projects like the Northern Sea Route and numerous cross-border pipelines and railways mean China and Russia are paving new ways to get goods to market, bypassing routes dominated by the US and its allies. This infrastructural push into new markets isn't just about economics, it's a strategic positioning that makes US pressures less effective and diversifies China's options in case of conflict or further tensions. So, folks, the big question is, as these two giants rewire the global financial and trade networks in their favor, what should the US be doing? All right, let's take a deep dive into the thick of the US-China trade war, a saga of tariffs, technology, and tit-for-tat strategies that reshape the global economic landscape. Starting back in 2018, during the Trump administration's first term, things really kicked off. The U.S. dropped the hammer, invoking Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, accusing China of intellectual property violations and unfair trading practices like forced technology transfers. These were big accusations, pointing to a massive $375 billion trade deficit with China in 2017, signaling deep economic imbalances. In July 2018, the first salvo was launched with tariffs targeting $34 billion worth of Chinese imports. Machinery, electronics, you name it. China didn't just sit back. They hit right back with retaliatory tariffs on key American agricultural products like soybeans and pork. This move was a gut punch to U.S. farmers, with markets like China that used to be gold mines for American soy turning to other suppliers like Brazil. By late 2019, the scope of this economic brawl widened dramatically. The U.S. had tariffs covering $550 billion in Chinese goods, sweeping up consumer products from electronics to toys. China's response: tariffs on $85 billion of U.S. exports. This tit-for-tat escalation wasn't just numbers on a page. It translated to higher costs for American businesses reliant on imports, and those costs trickled down to you and me, higher prices at the checkout. Now, here's where it gets even thicker. Both nations have been around the block with sanctions and trade restrictions. Russia, drawing from its playbook of dealing with Western sanctions since 2014, and China, from its own tangles with U.S. measures, have a deep well of experience to draw from. This isn't just about enduring the storm. It's about evolving strategies to minimize the damage and even engage in counter-sanctions. This collective wisdom means both China and Russia are better prepared to handle whatever economic curveballs come their way, potentially rendering U.S.-led sanctions less effective. They're pooling their knowledge on sanctions survival, shoring up their domestic industries, and developing more sophisticated economic defenses. In January 2020, amidst trade tensions that seemed to only escalate, the U.S. and China reached a landmark with the Phase 1 trade agreement. China agreed to beef up its purchases of U.S. goods and services by an additional $200 billion over 2017 levels, spanning manufactured products, agriculture, and energy. They also committed to tightening up on intellectual property rights and putting an end to forced technology transfers. In return, the U.S. took a step back, canceling some planned tariff hikes and reducing existing ones. But then enter COVID-19, throwing a wrench into the gears of global trade. By the end of 2021, China had only managed to meet about 60% of its purchase commitments under the deal. And let's not forget, deep-rooted issues like state-sponsored subsidies and industrial policies are still on the table, unresolved. Now, China's not just sitting around. They've ramped up their game with new extraterritorial export controls, a clear escalation in this trade and tech dispute with the U.S. This means foreign companies could find themselves in hot water for selling goods with Chinese origins to the U.S., adding a thick layer of complexity and uncertainty to global supply chains. And, folks, China's doubling down on its strategic resilience by tightening its alliance with Russia. This partnership is more than just a handshake. It's a multifaceted strategy aimed at buffering against a prolonged trade war with the U.S. With Russia's resources and political backing, China is less isolated and better equipped to handle pressures from U.S. policies. This alliance is tweaking the global economic landscape, challenging the U.S. ability to wield trade as a solo policy tool and securing China's spot as a key global player. This is a dynamic situation, constantly evolving, and the implications are massive, not just for these two superpowers, but for the entire global economy. We'll keep our eyes on how this plays out, and you should too. Thanks for tuning in today. If you found this discussion insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell for more updates. Join our community, share your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going. Catch our next video right here. Stay informed, stay connected.